Frankie,
Ian, you son of a bitch.
what's going on, brother?
How are you?
I'm good, man. I like what do we got on that shirt today?
Well, you've been bringing your A game with these Apollo Creeds and everything like that. And what I've learned is there's really only one manufacturer that makes all of those. And I ordered like 14 of them, which should be here next week. So today we're going with pink flamingos.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Very, very Florida motif. Like
You mailed it in. You got on an Under Armour shirt. At least that Under Armour shirt has sleeves.
Hey, man, I got it's comfortable. It's a comfortable shirt, man. This is my normal 5-on-4 attire. That's what I wear. So today's podcast is about a concept in psychology called self-handicapping. So do you know what self-handicapping is, Frank?
You know what, Ian? You're going to more articulately describe it. So why don't you go ahead?
All right. So here's the definition of self-handicapping. It is a cognitive strategy where we avoid effort to keep potential failure from hurting our self-esteem. So if you're about to run in a race, let's say you're about to run in a 5K with a bunch of friends, a form of self-handicapping might be going out to the bars the night before because you didn't train, and then really killing yourself by staying out too late, drinking beers the night before, and then telling all your friends right before the race, man, I feel rough, I was out all night. Or self-handicapping might be, withholding effort in school, waiting until the last minute to study, and then telling everyone I waited to the last minute to study when you had 3 weeks to prepare for an exam because you weren't confident in the first place you were going to get a good grade anyway. So you then go tank yourself even farther so that later on you could say you didn't put any effort in. So does that make sense, that definition?
It was my dating strategy through at least my sophomore year in college.
Yes, I like it.
Let me tell you why I can't get a date.
I didn't brush my teeth. I'm going to be honest, guys. Didn't even bother tonight. Didn't even bother. Haven't showered in days. Still going to talk to some girls, though. See how it goes. Just in case things don't go well. So this topic, I wrote about this topic. I wrote a post for my newsletter. I am very good at self-handicapping when it comes to golf. So I don't even know if I've golfed with you before. Have I ever golfed with you, Frank?
A couple times. It wasn't great for either of us.
Yeah. From what I recall, you suck at golf like I do. And I'm never going to get better at golf for one reason. I want everyone to know I'm bad at golf. I talk about being bad at golf. I love being bad at golf. That's kind of my shtick. That's my brand. And I wrote about just how the lengths I will go to make everyone aware that I don't care about golf. And I golf with good golfers. So I have 3 good friends that live near me, and we all coach together. We coach our kids, and they continue to invite me out golfing, probably for humor, to feel good about their own game, to watch mine. But I have used clubs. I have 7 clubs that I carry out there, and I think they're 5 different brands. So I've bought these all. Play It Again Sports is the majority of where my clubs have come from. My putter is so old that the grip on it got all tattered and beat up. So I ripped it off and retaped it with black hockey tape. So it's real sticky on my hands. I pull my hands off on it. But when I miss a putt, I could be like, look at this old crappy putter I got. I golf in sneakers. I rarely have on attire fit for a decent course.
You sound like Happy Gilmore without a good drive.
Pretty much that's me out there. I just don't hit it as straight as Happy Gilmore hits it.
You wear Timberlands that you don't tie?
I mean, it's close. It's close.
The next time we make a bet, I'm buying you a pair of shitty Timberlands that you have to golf in.
See, the area of Michigan where I grew up, Frank, sleeves are optional on every golf course. And in fact, most places where I golfed growing up, shirts were actually optional. There was no one working on the course that would come tell you to put your shirt back on. So normally golf was reserved for people like me that were out there to work on our tan a little bit and drink a few Busch Lights. So that's where I honed my amazing golf skills. But because of all these things, there are zero expectations of anyone who golfs with me that Ian's going to put up a decent score. I don't even keep score. I just hit my balls, and if I lose a ball, whatever, I'm just out there to have a good time with the guys. So there's zero expectations. But deep down, would I like to be a little better at golf? Yeah, I'm a competitive guy. I played sports my whole life. I don't love sucking at golf, but I also know on the other side of it, I'm not willing to put in hundreds of hours to be better at golf. So my choices are to accept my role as a golfer, as someone who's not going to practice, or I can get all uptight every time I golf that I'm not doing better, even though I'm not putting the effort in. So this is a form of self-handicapping. But a lot of people do this in business. And when I say a lot of people, present company is included as it relates to that. And so I think it's a good conversation to talk about today, that self-handicapping in general, how it can hurt you as a business owner, how it can hurt you in any career as you're growing within an organization. So I used golf as an example. Do you have any personal examples outside of an office that you can think of where you've self-handicapped yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Like I used to be an athlete, and I've had 20 extra pounds on my body for the better part of 5 presidential cycles. So like I just started joking about being chubby, and like I don't want to be chubby, I want to be lean. But like it's been one of those things that become like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And we all do it. We all do it. And I think like in hearing you tell the story about golf, the thing that I started to think about was we all do it. And it's kind of like a rite of passage in a way. And it's kind of an arc. And if you do want to get good at something, like let's just say golf, right? Like our buddy Nickel, he broke 80 a couple days ago in golf. And he's not a golfer at all. He's a high-powered executive. He doesn't golf, but like with COVID, it was something he could go do. And he would just golf, and he broke 80. And he goes, I've hit all my expectations. I'm happy with that. Like he's not going to take lessons into perpetuity to try and shave 4 strokes off. He's good enough. So he kind of went out, he did it, he had a goal, and it became what it became, and he's happy with it. So in a lot of instances, it comes from not really setting the expectation of what it is that you want out of it. And you kind of half-ass it, and you kind of stumble into it with some of these, self-handicapping tendencies. But then the other thing of it is maybe you self-handicap and then you say, you know what, I'm going to get serious with this. And you kind of grow up a little bit and you drop some of that rhetoric, and that's when it changes. But it's scary. Like most of the time with this stuff, it's a defense mechanism because you don't want to be made fun of. Or if it's a bigger thing, like, finding a spouse, building a business, losing weight, you don't want to do it, or you're afraid of it, or you're scared. And then you use this as kind of a defense mechanism.
Yeah. I think defense mechanism is, I think that's perfect. I think, and people, so take the weight. So people joke about, I got a dad bod, or, I put on the freshman 15 or 20, and they joke about it and they embrace it. And I love my dad bod. That's bullshit. No one loves a dad bod. If anyone was offered a choice, you would not take the latter. You'd rather be able to wear the same clothes you wore when you were in high school and college, right? No one's taking that. They're just saying.
I'll take the Brad Pitt from Snatch, please. Like,
yes,
I'll take that with my head.
100%, right? So it's a bit of you poke fun at it. But really what you're trying to do is get ahead of, the insult that someone else might throw at you. So you insult yourself first.
You're front running the ridicule, And it literally, this stems from the bus in 7th grade. You're front running that, you're getting ahead of it, and then, it gets popularized. But I think it's a good thing to talk about, right? Like, anyone who's ever accomplished anything in their life has had to deal with self-doubt. And like, I think, Ian, let's pivot it to like the conversations you and I have had when you thought about quitting your job and not knowing exactly what that was going to look like. Like, telling people, hey, I've never had a course on writing, but I want to become a writer. Or me wanting to start a real estate business and people think I'm nuts. And I kind of just joke about it. And it isn't fruitful, but you kind of build yourself into a little bit of a wedge. So you have the ability to not get poked when you're vulnerable.
Yeah, I thought about leaving NVR for 2 years before I left, and I didn't get serious about it until I told you, and I told you, and I told John McCauley that I'm thinking of leaving NVR, and it was a bit shocking to both of you to even hear it, even though I had been thinking about it forever. But it wasn't until I told you that it became reality that I could do it. Because then you listened, you guys asked great questions. It wasn't like you were like, go do it, get out of there. You guys were both very balanced about, well, walk me through why you're thinking it. How are you thinking about it? You told me about how you made the decision. Both of you told me that. But by talking about that as a goal, the year and a half before, what I was doing instead was acting like I've just embraced the fact that I'm a career guy and I love being miserable and working all these hours and not having any creativity. I talked about all that. Whenever we would talk about it, I would just tell you how much I loved all of that, which was self-handicapping, because what that did was it would keep you from asking me questions that I didn't feel like dealing with, right? So I did a lot of that. And once I told you I'm thinking about this, now every time I talk to you, once I told you how miserable I was, now I would have to own it. I would have to own that I'm not doing anything about the fact that I'm wallowing around here. Before, when I told you, hey, I love it, it's great, I'm having a great time, they're paying me a lot, having fun, you had nothing to ask me questions about. But once I told you I'm absolutely hating everything about this, then it was like, oh, like now when I talk to you, you'd be like, so what's going on at work?
So here's what I think makes sense. And this is a little different than how we did this in prep, but you've gone far enough into this where I think what you should do is you should talk about what your self-handicapping was. You kind of talked about it with NVR, but you get through it. And then let's get to the other side of it. And then maybe where I'll pick it up is I've built the business, I found the network and the stuff that you wanted to ask me the questions about. But I think for people listening, like most people listening to this podcast either want to be better where they are or they want an opportunity they don't currently have, right? And quitting your job is a big thing for a lot of people. So what I've been able to do is quit my job and turn into a business. What you've been able to do is you've been able to be really smart and specific in how you spend your time. And one of your self-fulfilling prophecies or your self-handicappings was when you quit, you just say you were retired, which was BS. It was just a safety play so people wouldn't ask questions. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, Ian, getting to the point where when people ask you what you're doing, you from wanting to quit to no longer telling people I'm just retired.
Yeah. So, my self-handicapping before I started being honest with some people very close with me, and this includes my wife. My self-handicap when I was tired or irritable at work or people would ask, I'd just be like, we're just trying to get caught up. And, but I would lie about how I felt about working. I would kind of hide behind the money part of it and always do that. And when I stopped self-handicapping is when I just started being honest and telling people that were close to me that I could not stand what I was doing anymore. I found no interest in it. It bored the hell out of me. And the only reason I was working was for a paycheck, which is an embarrassing thing to admit. That's an embarrassing thing. And now, albeit as a senior executive at NVR, that paycheck was substantial. It was massive. So, when you say that to someone, that kind of shuts the conversation down, but it's embarrassing to admit to someone that you are miserable at work when you're talented and that person knows you have options. So for me to admit it to you or to Jenny or to other friends that are successful and say, I just can't stand what I'm doing. It's a bit embarrassing because I'm talking to people that know I have so many options in the world, and I'm choosing to just put up with my situation. So once I started admitting the level of my misery, it forced me to start taking some actions to move. And you're right. So I leave NVR, an email goes out, I am just bombarded with phone calls for 2 weeks. And they kind of came in waves. The first phone calls are from the people that were closest with you, that reported directly to you. Then that next level reaches out because they knew you were busy. So all you do is take phone calls for 2 weeks. And everyone that would ask me, what are you going to do? I'd say, I'm retired. And it just shut the conversation down because I didn't want to admit, I'm not really sure. I knew what I wanted to do was go acquire some commercial real estate. I wanted to build a commercial real estate book of business, perhaps grow it into a fund. I wanted to bring investors in. I knew generally what I wanted to do, Frank, but I didn't know how to do it yet. And so I was reticent to admit what my goal was. So if anyone asked me, I just said, I'm retired. I'm going to chill. I'm going to feed squirrels. I'm going to travel the world. And there's not much someone can say to that, right? What do you say to someone who says, I'm retired, I've got enough money, and I'm going to just spend time with my family? You say that to someone, they're like, good for you. That's amazing. That's great. But if you say, I'm not sure and I'm a little stressed about it, that puts you on a whole different level of accountability, because they're like, what do you mean you're not sure? What are you going to do? Then they ask a lot more questions. Saying I'm retired just shut it down. And I didn't, that probably lasted a few weeks until I started telling people I'm going to go acquire a commercial real estate property in the Southeast. And the more specific I would get, and not just a commercial real estate, I'm going to go acquire an industrial real estate property. And not just that, I'm going to get a publicly traded big tenant with a long-term lease. And then I would get into the story. I would tell people about my father-in-law and the type of real estate he buys. And actually, I've been thinking about this much longer than I want to admit, maybe 20 years. And I would talk about Ted's real estate and how smart he's been about it. And I would like to do that. And the more I started sharing that, very specifically what I wanted to do, it put me on a different level of accountability. Once I started telling people, and I started telling everyone, it wasn't just you. It started with you, and then I felt comfortable that I could share this. I started showing up at coffee houses with, 100, 200 names, and I would just cold call. I would cold call over and over and over until, I found leads and it started to build. And once I started telling people I was going to acquire commercial real estate, within 2 months, I had my first property. And it all started when I quit self-handicapping and saying I'm retired.
So there's two things in there that you said that I really want to dial into. I have friends that have immigrated here from Russia, one to Ukraine, one from like just outside of Moscow. And I had dinner with both of them last night. And the word trapped came up. None of us are trapped. We're in America. We're business people. Most of us are educated, high school, college, something. We're not trapped. We get choices and we get to come out of those traps. But you probably felt at a period in time where you were trapped, didn't you not, Ian? Because you're trapped by the paycheck or the security or all these other things.
It was stock. It was stock options. It was equity in the company, and
Golden
stock
handcuffs.
options don't pay until certain dates. And so you feel like you have to stay until January 1st of the next year to get your big paycheck. And they never end. They just keep giving you more so that you feel like you have to stay. So yes.
Working in a diamond mine in Sierra Leone is trapped. Working at a corporation here in America isn't trapped. It's just, you got to pick a smart exit, not just bust through a wall and handicap yourself completely. But
that's right.
Having these people that have moved and given up their lives and speak with an accent because they didn't grow up here and they weren't born here, we're not trapped. That's the first thing you have to realize. The second thing is this. Anyone who's ever done anything of magnitude or note, Jeff Bezos comes to mind, Steve Jobs comes to mind. At periods in their life, people thought they were nuts. I had a very cushy job. My job, I quit a decade before you. So I wasn't as high up the ladder as you were. People thought I was absolutely out of my mind, out of my mind. And I would just be kind of curt. I wouldn't give a lot of explanation because I didn't want the negative talk to bring me down. And I didn't want to hear it. But I remember like the first deal I made $100,000 on, all of a sudden everyone was like, ooh, I want to do what Frankie's doing. But for 5 or 6 years, I had to go through all the crap and push it aside. And that's what you were able to do. You were able to realize, I'm not trapped. I want to get out. I'm really not happy if I look at the core of this. And then you got real specific in what you wanted. And if you do that, so it's kind of crazy to quit that job, but then getting real specific, you also neutralize almost the way you do when you self-handicap. How many people understand commercial real estate in the Southeast? A very small number. It's the same number of people who aren't going to be able to say, hey, when you're retired, they don't know how to say anything to that. So what you've done is self-handicapping is controlling the narrative. It doesn't work well in your head. But then when you get confident, you know what you're going to do, you control the narrative in a very different way. And that was kind of your arc.
Yeah. And I'll add something to that. So by being very specific about the type of properties that I wanted to do, it locked me down on what tasks I was doing each day. It really honed my focus. And then once I acquired one, then I started telling people the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to bring investors in. And I don't know if you felt this, Frank, but once you start talking to people about I'm going to raise money, what's fascinating about that is when I started telling people that, then people would say, they'd either say, I'm interested. So you tell someone like, well, you know, at some point I'm going to bring some investors in because I'm going to run out of money and won't be able to do all these myself. So they either say, I'm interested, or they would say, you should call so-and-so. They're looking to invest and they would probably love what you're up to. And just by me, you know, because for a while I said, I don't want investors. I just want to do these myself. I want to just be relaxed with my family. And that was fine. But once I said, I'm going to raise money, all of a sudden contacts started showing up, right? And I started getting opportunities. And it was 3 months after my first property that I syndicated the second one, where half of the $3.5 million property were private investors that I raised money. And I'd never done that before. So I don't know if you found the same with raising money. Once you start talking about it, the money starts showing up.
One of the things I was going to get to a little later was getting leverage over yourself. And it's part of this process, right? Like it's mastery of what we're going through. But what you do is you get leverage over yourself. And one of the ways you start to do that is you just, like you did, you kind of just put yourself out there. And it's amazing what happens. Like you weren't looking to raise money. You were simply just telling people what you were doing because you were confident enough. You're confident enough. And because of that, it changed what was happening. And that brought you investors.
Yeah. What we talk about tends to materialize, and it's not some stupid ass universal, you know, coming to help you, the universe listening to you. There's none of that. That's the book, The Secret, is garbage. But I do think when you talk about things, you tend to see opportunities popping up in your life all over the place. And when you talk about things, people in your network can help you. You never know if you bring something up, you never know who just talked to someone who's also interested in the same thing that can help you. And these little connections happen. But if you just say, I'm good, then people are like, all right, he's good. They leave it alone. But if you say, I'm not good and I'd like to change something, and here's how I would like to change it, your network can help you.
So let's connect those dots. Self-handicapping is basically the best way humanly possible to not put yourself out there. But by putting yourself out there, the universe opens up to you and you never know what's going to happen. And that's just the thing that we're trying to get to. That at its core, that's what this is. Like simply, like you can't be a yard sale, but at the same time, if you're somewhat strategic in what it is that you say, and it's somewhat curated, it can lead to incredible places.
And so how many people do you know, Frank, that say things like money is the root of all evil, or money doesn't buy happiness? People that say that are never going to have money, but do they really believe that they don't want to have money? That's like saying I'm good with being overweight. That's bull crap. That's something you say because you don't want to fail. And so you want everyone to know I'm actually pretty good with being poor and not knowing how my next mortgage payment's going to be made. So you say things like money doesn't buy happiness. Well, bullshit. Like, that's just bullshit. I am dramatically happier with money than I was when I was dead broke and I had credit card bills that I didn't know I was going to pay. Dramatically happier. So for people that have made money, that have worked their ass off and got to a position of wealth, don't say things like I was happier when I was dead broke. They rarely do.
So do you want to, the entire genesis of this conversation is we wanted to get to a mastermind group, right? And like talking about having people that can help push you. And a lead up to that is this: the only people in my life that I ever hear say dumb shit like that are people who are kind of in circles of my life that I just bump into from time to time. Family reunions, things along those lines. Like, you can't choose some of those folks, and they say things, but no one in my life, none of the core people in my life, top 100 to 200 influencers in my life, say anything even similar to that, because I choose the audience I'm around. And nobody says, hey, being 100 pounds overweight's fine for me. No one says being broke's fine. And so these little things make a difference, like who you consort with, who you are around. It's huge. If that is the talk track that's happening around you, no kidding that you're going to be doing these self-deprecating type of actions, because it's hard to break out of that. But if you can surround yourself with people that think differently or speak differently, that's a big part of it.
I think I love what you just said. So picking your network, picking the people that you spend, and when you say 100, 200, let's be real. There's probably 10 people that really influence us the most, that we talk to 90% of the time, that really influence us, that we care, that we pay attention to.
But let's stop there. Think about all of the people that you interact with, people where you take your kid to daycare, or your neighbors, or like there's hundreds of people you come in contact with on a weekly basis. And if you're in the wrong dynamic overall, it's going to be so hard to feel this way. But making small little adjustments like we have made over time, where you choose to be, who you choose to surround yourself with, who is their family, who are their friends, what are they talking about? Like all of those little things, there are 5 or 10 people who you really care about what they think, but there's a lot of people that are in your ear. And so, and it's really like guys like us were able to overcome a lot of this stuff, and we kind of got into a place, we have great friends, we have people we can rely on. But for people who kind of feel like I've got the wrong chirping birds in my ear, you either need to ignore them, or you got to put yourself in a different place, or a combination of both.
And I think it's incredibly hard to ignore them. Honestly, I think you can say I'm going to ignore them, but I also say I'm going to ignore a box of Nilla wafers when they're in my cabinet, and I end up eating them by the end of the night every time. The way for me to overcome that situation is to not purchase Nilla wafers, right? That if I know that about myself, if I know I'm influenced by something, then I have to get away from it. So if the people close to you are also self-handicappers and are not willing to call you out, I think what you're talking about, we all slip and start self-handicapping. You and I have just admitted a few things that we're pretty bad about. But if you have the right network, they'll call you out, right? Quickly. If you started doing that around me, I'd be like, really, Frank, is that really how you feel? Like that's what, and if you're around, if you have the right network, when they call you out, when you are putting your ego ahead of growth.
Yeah. The other thing is too, you've got the right network of people when you don't even think to bring these things up. like, I'm not going to bother Ian with this crap. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the story and it's a combination of those things kind of holding yourself to a higher standard.
Well, I think so. Let's get to the mastermind here, because I think when you left big Fortune 500 company, that's all you had known in business for 13 years since college. You went to University of Florida, you graduated, and you moved to Virginia. You had no family, you had no friends in Virginia. All of the people that you interacted with, your best friends in Virginia, all of your confidants, they were all NVR people. They were all company people. That was your network. And now you're out of the network. So
Right.
you couldn't call that group the way you used to, because your goals were different than theirs and they didn't understand what you were doing. So what was that like when you realized, and how quickly did you realize, wow, my network isn't that helpful anymore because they're all still focused on the company goals?
So the same thing happened to me that happened to you. There's a period of euphoria for a few weeks that lasts, and everybody misses you, and you're going to coffees and lunches and dinners. And then it's just lonely. And you kind of realize, like, what I need to embark upon is very different than where I was. And this kind of comes back to what I said a second ago about choosing the right people to be around and having the right people chirp in your ear. Most of us, so for me, it was 2009. The internet wasn't what the internet is now. So it was harder to find online groups and other things. So a lot of it was just like, I believe in this. I'll buy a couple of courses. I might fly out to Vegas and go to a couple of seminars and see people who are doing stuff in a similar space. But I've got to just kind of start with the fundamentals and just get started and kind of build inertia. And with inertia and success, then came the confidence to actually enroll into a mastermind group where there were people who were similar to me or ahead of me that I thought could possibly, I thought I had enough to say at that point, and I thought there was people in the group who could help me because of their experiences. But it took '09 to basically the end of 2012, so 4 full years.
Yeah. And when you left a Fortune 500 company, what would you say your network was? How many people within the company would you have considered your network? People you could get a favor from, or you would do a favor from? 1,000 plus or minus?
It was a lot.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. It was a ton.
I mean, mine was a couple thousand when I left, right? Just in my business unit alone, I had 700 some people that reported to me. And then everyone on the home building side that I knew from time to, like, these are all people that if I called would call me right back. And the minute I wasn't with that company, I no longer had value to add to them. I could no longer do anything for them. But the truth is they couldn't add any value for me anymore. So it's not like I don't like those folks anymore. They don't need me and I don't need them. It's not, our goals are divergent now. And so I personally, like you, had to start building a network outside of what I had built for 13 years.
That's right. And I didn't get as high up the corporate ladder as you. You were, top 20 executive. I was running a division. I will say it this way. I had hundreds of contacts, and then I felt like I had zero, and I had to start over. And one of the things that is so really critically important here is I'm in real estate. Real estate grows with debt. Debt is money. You need people who will give you loans. And at first, no bank's going to give you a loan. Most of your money comes from friends or family. And Ian and another guy, Nickel, who I reference a lot, are two of my best friends and two people I rely on. They were the last people I wanted to ask for money because I didn't really have a network. All I had was a support staff of people who would believe in me. And the last thing I wanted to do was have, an investment go sideways that I couldn't pay back. And then I lost those people. So what you really have to kind of focus on is there's going to be this moment where your world gets smaller and you're going to have a lot of doubt, like a ton of doubt. Like, what was I thinking? And if I'm being completely honest, that period was about 4 or 5 years for me of, I left a great job. This is really hard. This is this is a massive struggle. And then what you start to do is you get the talk track. You're no longer beating yourself up. You get through all of that stuff. Then you find a network. And then what starts to happen is all that early work that you did amplifies and grows. And that's the power of being around people in a group who can help you because they've lived what you live with.
So talk about that mastermind group, which this is not a critical or, this is not a way of saying this in any negative way, but at first, when you get into a mastermind, you're buying a network. Is that fair to say? When you first get into it, you're buying a different network, buying into a different group?
And here's another thing about a network. Here's another thing about a mastermind. It's just like all the other stuff. You tell your friends and they call you nuts. Oh, I don't need to be in a fraternity in college. You're buying a network of friends. Like, it's the same talk track crap you hear wherever you go. So if you believe in a mastermind group and you think you found the right one for you, don't listen to anybody else. Do it.
So what is a mastermind group in general?
So,
what is it?
So specifically the mastermind group we're referring to for me is a group called the Collective Genius, or CG. CG is, when I joined in 2013, there was about 50 members. Now it's it's closer to 200. And I went from a member to a leader. I'm a paid leader in this mastermind group. But at its simplest form, CG was for people who did 50 transactions a year in the real estate investing space. You must do that, or you must own at least 50 units. So what is it? It's real estate based, which is specific to what I did. It had a benchmark where it wasn't a bunch of buffoons in a room, which you have a lot. The leader of it was making sure there was a baseline and everybody was above that. So you kind of came in with the mindset of, I'm going to be around like-minded people with like-minded successes. There's people in the room that had done way, 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 way more. And then there was people that barely squeaked in. But collectively, we were all doing the same thing as a primary business. And it was like-minded people doing like-minded things that had some level of success that could be shared. That is at its core what a good mastermind is.
Okay, and so you join this mastermind, and it's not like everyone in this networking group that you've bought into just calls you and starts giving you advice. There's meetings, so you meet quarterly, and
Yep.
then what takes place at these meetings? Your first couple of meetings, what were they like?
So it's hysterical, right? The whole thing we're talking about with self-handicapping, I ended up bringing someone who worked in my business to the first meeting, but I almost didn't bring him. I almost called you and said, hey, why don't you come with me? Because I wanted to put on like a front that I was better than what I was. And instead of doing that, I was honest. I said, this is what I'm good at, and this is what I suck at. And the list of what I suck at was 10 times as long as the list of what I was good at. And what happened was I finished my presentation and everybody clapped. And then we went to lunch and someone walked up and said, hey, I dealt with that same problem. What are you doing? And we started to talk, and that person started to help me. And what I realized was, if you go up there and you bullshit your way through it, you're never going to get the help you need. No one's going to understand. So what you end up doing is you say, hey, I'm really good at these 2 or 3 things. And you kind of talk about them, and you talk about the things that you need help with. And what happens is someone's going to invariably say, I'm good at what you're weak at. And then someone else is going to come up and say, hey, I need help with what you're good at. And that's at its core what it is. It's synergies between people who can help each other. So let me tell you what this manifests into. I'm in Richmond, Virginia. I do real estate. We don't run across a lot of deals that are called subject to. Subject to is basically you take over a mortgage for somebody else. If you're not in real estate, this doesn't really matter. But I don't deal with it a lot because I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and there's just not a lot of opportunity for that. But there's a guy, he's one of my good buddies. His name is Mike Jake. He's in Colorado Springs. Everything he does is subject to. So the first time I was on a subject to appointment after I was in the mastermind, I was confused. I texted Mike Jake and said, hey, I'm on appointment. I don't know how to answer a question. Do you have 3 minutes for me? He texted me back, yeah, call now. I told the person I was in the appointment with, I said, hey, look, I need to step out real quick and take a call. I don't know how to answer this question, but I know how to, I got the answer. I'll be right back. I talked to him. I told him what the problem was. He gave me the answer. It was no bullshit. It was like right to the point. I was like, all right, I'll call you on the car ride home. And I walked back into the meeting and I got the deal done. That's what a network does. I didn't know. I knew I had a utility knife in my toolbox. I pulled it out and I used it. And that was my buddy Mike. That's what happens. And then what happens with that, I know how to do that deal now. That's a tool I now have. I don't have to call him every time. Another tool that came up from the mastermind group is how you can take ownership of something as a non-owner. That's another tool. So these are the little things that start to happen as you get into this network, you help, but you get better and you grow. And then what happens is it's just stacking chips. Eventually what happens is you have all these skills you didn't used to have because you've got a network of people who can help you.
How important, Frank, for you as a new owner, how important is the reporting aspect of a mastermind group? Standing in front of your peers or other folks in the group and saying, here's what I told you I was going to do 3 months ago, and here's what I actually did. How important is that component of a mastermind? Because you went from a Fortune 500 company where you had a manager who was holding you accountable. That's the nature of all of us that have worked for corporations, is there's no shortage of managers to tell you what you're doing right and wrong. And then when you're an owner, there's none of that. It's just you holding yourself accountable.
So not everybody uses a mastermind this way. And one of the terms I used earlier was getting leverage over yourself. And I'm a big believer in that. So what I used to do when I was in a mastermind, and I told you this, I used to put up my quarterly goals. Not everyone does this, but I would say, hey, here are my quarterly goals for the next quarter. And then when I would show up a quarter later, I'd say, these were my goals. This is my actual. These are my goals. And I'm kind of talking to just a room. But what I was doing is I was putting myself out there and saying, these are the things that I want to achieve. If we'll get into goal setting at some point, I set a goal. I had time frame associated to it. And I had leverage over myself because I shared it. And even if they were only partially listening, like nobody called me up and said, hey, how'd you do with that goal? But it meant something to me to say that I shared this and then I was going to achieve it or not achieve it and report it. And that is the same thing as you admitting I'm going to buy real estate in the Southeast. Like, it's very specific. It's measurable. Did you buy something or not? So those are the things that you can do to set up wins. And that's how I used it. I use it as, this is going to be something that helps me feel like I'm back in corporate where I was successful, gives me something to shoot for, and then I'm going to have to let myself down if I don't hit this goal. And there was a period in time where I gave the owner of CG a check for 10 grand. And I said, if I don't hit this goal between now and the next meeting, this goes to charity. I mean, it was a $10,000 keep myself accountable kind of a thing. And those, when you're starting to get momentum in a business, sometimes you need that. And that helped me a lot.
How much do you now you are a facilitator, you're a leader within this mastermind. You've been doing it now for 10 years. So, you probably the reporting piece is no longer as important to you with this group.
Correct.
Because there's much more junior folks than you coming.
Right.
You're now one of the guys that's done thousands of units, whereas when you started, you just done a handful. So now that you're a facilitator, when you see new companies coming through, is it readily apparent when they are playing the victim role, when they're self-handicapping? Can you sniff it out really quick when someone feels the world is out to get them? And do you know in your mind, this person's not going to get better before the next time I see them? They just won't.
Yeah. And so I don't own the mastermind. I own my business, and I really don't think about what I do here. I just do what I think is right, and that's it. But with the mastermind, I get a paycheck. It's ultimately not my business. I have to be very mindful of what the owner wants. But the owner understands that I'm kind of a hard ass, and he understands that I really want results. So I call people out on it, even though he's not comfortable doing it. And like, you have to do so in a somewhat delicate manner. But yeah, Like, I remember there was about a year and a half ago, someone you met and you saw one of his posts and you're like, this guy just isn't going to make it. If you remember that, like literally he put something out there that we both saw, and he didn't. His business has gone under, but like 18 months ago, he was up there and he's like, yeah, he was hemming and he was hawing. And it's not my job as a facilitator to breathe down your neck or help you. It's to kind of facilitate, but I do the job. So sometimes if I see you're BSing yourself, I'm going to just jump in. And I'm like, the interaction went something along these lines. He had a bunch of things that he had as goals, and he told us why he couldn't accomplish the goals. And then I told him, I was like, I have goals in my business. Do you know what's going to stop me from hitting those goals? And this was laced with profanity. Absolutely freaking nothing. Absolutely nothing. I will stop at nothing to hit these goals. And I hit them. And in my business, and he didn't in his, because he didn't attack it the same way. There's a harsh reality. Someone's going to get it. In your mark, and it's a lot of people want whatever it is that you want. You've got to be smarter, harder working. You got to out negotiate. There's something. And you got to chase it. But if you really want it and you chase it and you're smart and you think about how to get there, you can get there. And that's kind of what we're talking about with this whole overarch of this podcast is you can get there. The network will help you, but ultimately you got to figure out how to get leverage so you do go get it and you don't just make up a story.
Yeah. And look, for folks listening, you might not have $10,000, $20,000 to put into a mastermind group. You know, this is a concept that we're using as an explanation to show that even business owners don't hold themselves accountable, that they slip into self-handicapping. It's as simple as tell your parents about a goal. I feel more accountable as soon as I tell my mom I'm going to accomplish something. I feel more accountable. Tell a friend who is successful. Tell a professor. Tell a teacher. Tell a coach. Tell a family member who has been successful at something. Tell your goal. Tell your ambitions, even the ones that scare you, because as soon as you do it, it doesn't sound as scary. As soon as I started telling people, I'm going to buy a collision center in Georgia or Florida with a 10-year lease, and I got some things to figure out how to get there. Once I got very specific, it didn't feel as scary. Like once I told one person, I told 50, I told 100, because once I vocalized, it's like, oh, that doesn't have power over me anymore. That's not as scary as I thought it would be. And the more I told people, the more I researched, the more I learned, the more specific I kept getting. I kept getting more and more and more specific because I was learning and figuring out how to do it. And so to me, whether you join a group, whether you buy a network, whether your network's not good enough, there are always good enough people in your network to start sharing your goals, no matter how small they are. Once you share them, you've now made yourself accountable. So my advice is you've got to ask yourself, when you're not sharing something, why is my ego more important than this goal? I think that's a critical question to ask yourself. Why is my ego taking precedent over the goal? And do I really care about this goal? Because the truth is, I really don't care about shooting 80 in golf. It's not that important to me. There's bigger things in my life. Maybe when I'm older, right now where my kids' age is where they're at, the other things I've got going in my life, it's just not a goal I care about. So yeah, I'm self-handicapping to protect my ego a little, but also I really don't care about the goal so much. But there are a lot of goals where I self-handicap, where I need to just stop it. And I need to be more honest and tell people what my real goal is.
So you said a few things there I want to unpackage, right? There's somebody in your life, family, friend, business colleague, even from your old network that you have respect for and you don't want to let down. If you start to tell those people what your goals are, eventually what happens is it's a good first pass on who to talk to about it.
Yeah,
Ian said, Mom, but like we talked about how like our networks went from hundreds and thousands of people down to like zero, but there are good people in there that say, hey, this is what I want to do. And if you're cool with it, I love to call you when I hit a success. And, you know, we go to Kenny or Keith or one of those guys from our life and do that. They'd be thrilled to hear from us quickly. because we're no longer in their business. But, so it gets it out there. The other thing is this. I don't know where you are when you listen to this, but so let's go through this, Ian. You quit your job. That was hard, but you've already quit it. Some of your goals after you quit that were to buy commercial real estate. You've done that. You wanted to become a writer. You started off doing it really slow and small for Quora, and then you got published in Inc., and then you got published in Forbes, and now you're a regular contributor there, right?
Yeah.
All right. What are some of the other things you've already accomplished since you've quit NVR?
I think from a consulting perspective, that couldn't have been faster. The first person I told, I'm getting a little bored. I'm writing. I got the real estate thing going. That's all great. I wouldn't mind consulting for some, for some small companies. The first person I told, within a week, I was in front of his CEO. He was
let's
like,
do
really,
this.
wow, you could really help. And then that's how 5 on 4 started. The first person I admitted that I'm a little bored, that happened.
But I want to do an exercise. So let's do this a little faster without the story. So consulting, what are the other things you've achieved?
I have an online leadership program that I never thought I was going to build.
What else?
I'm investing in a tech startup right now. It's the second tech startup that I've been involved in as a chief revenue officer, and that'll be done in another month.
What else? That's a lot.
I raised money for a residential real estate deal that you and I are now involved in with 75 properties and $5.5 million of assets.
So I want you to just pause for a second. I want to say an editorial note. And I want to go forward. So that's quite a bit of achievement. That's a lot of stuff. What's next? What haven't you done that's on your list?
Man, that's a good question.
Stop right there. That's exactly what I wanted. If you have achieved what you wanted to, or you haven't achieved what you wanted to, that's fine. What we've achieved rolls off the tongue. What we want to achieve is harder. That's part of the process. That's what we want you to see. It's already hard. We know what we've done, and we can celebrate those things and pat ourselves on the back. What comes in front of us needs to be calculated. It needs to be smart. You need to think, can I act? Do I want to achieve this? And if I do, can I? You don't need the rhetoric and the self-talk about not, or that's the whole point of this. It's hard enough. So in less than 3 years' time, Ian has achieved all of these things, and there's more runway ahead of him. But you've got to be very mindful of it's already hard. Don't make it worse.
Yeah. And it doesn't always have to be something new. So, now that I've had a minute to think about what you just asked me, I think I'd just like to be better at all the stuff I've already started. Right? I don't need a lot of new, you and I are doing this podcast thing. That'd be cool. We get something going and we make it happen. I can be patient, but I think with most things, I just want to iterate. I want to sell more programs. I want to build a bigger following. I want to write more impactful things to help more people. I want to do more tech startup investments. You and I are going to build a real estate fund one day that's going to rival that of the company we worked at. That's going to happen. So everything, it doesn't have to be new and shiny. It could just be, why don't you just get better at all the little things that you're doing right now and iterate, make them better as you go.
So you usually do the wraps on this. I'm going to offer up kind of a good point that we can wrap off of. And it's kind of this. No matter if something's new or if something isn't new, whenever you try something, you go through phases. And what Ian and I are talking about is we've hit success in our life. Like if you talk to both of us, we still have a thirst for more. And whenever we start something new, there's always skepticism, there's always negative self-talk, and there's always places where we don't think we're as good as we need to be to get further along. But in my prep for this, what I put down is this is kind of the arc. I don't know what I want to do, or I don't believe in myself. Eventually, you start to believe. And what we talk about in this podcast is how you can help to start to believe by telling someone like your mom or a friend. That's when the belief starts. That's the first seed. Then you start to do. And then once you start to do, you start to embrace. And then once you embrace, you start to achieve. And once you achieve, you start to stack, and then you can get better, and then you can grow. And every single time you start something new or a new endeavor, it kind of goes through that arc. And that is the absolute, like, we're talking about this because we think it's important, but we're also talking about because we live through it constantly, like constantly. That's just how it goes. Yeah. And it's the same. You can't microwave that process.
I love it. And I think wrapping it all up, everything you just said in that arc starts with how we talk. It starts with self-talk, the things we talk about, the ambitions that we share are what start that arc. If you're not willing to talk about it, if you're not willing to share what your ambitions are, what your dreams are, what you really want to do, whether it's leaving, whether it's finding another job, finding a different industry, starting a company, being better in your company, being better at anything, if you are not willing to talk about it and be honest about it and put yourself out there, you're not going to reach anything. You just are not. Humans are terrible at holding themselves accountable. We need that push.
All right. I want to tell a cool story I didn't tell you about in prep. That's part of this, right? So my Uncle Frank, like one of my heroes, you know him, you've met him. Yeah. He's awesome. He used to dance on Broadway. He's like larger than life. In 2011, I'm telling this story for a very specific reason. You need to have a confidant, set a goal, have a confidant, but then you also need to realize when you achieve something. 2011, him and I are in Las Vegas at a conference, and we're just paying participants amongst a sea of several hundred to 1,000 people. And we're sitting down at lunch, and I told him, within 5 years, I have no business saying this. Within 5 years, I'm going to be on one of these stages, and I'm going to be speaking within 5 years. In 2016, I got asked to speak in front of a crowd. It was a big crowd. It was over 1,000 people for the first time ever. It was within 5 years, and I paid my uncle's flight to make sure he was there to watch me on that stage.
That's incredible.
Because I set that freaking goal. We met that goal. I talked about it from stage. He was filming me with his camera phone. And it was one of those things where I put myself out there. I told the right person. I held myself accountable to it. But then don't forget to celebrate. He was there with me to do it. It was just a really cool thing. And it means something. Yeah. And the other part of it is when you set a goal and you achieve a goal and you allow yourself to enjoy the goal, you have a lot more willingness to take that chance the next time.
Love that story. That is a phenomenal way to wrap up a successful podcast. Good hanging out with you, buddy.
Always a pleasure, Ian.
I like those flamingos, man. Keep them coming. Keep these nice shirts coming, Florida boy.
Next week, I got one even better.
I'm ready. I'm excited about it. See you, man.
See ya.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.